Hello, my name is Yesenia Cortez, and I will be completing my English 1302 final. And what I will be discussing today is some of the concepts that we have worked on and modified throughout the semester, and one of them is the research process. And so, some of the things that I have learned is that research begins with a question or a problem. And so, for example, that can be done through these worksheets that have been created by my professor to slowly developing our research question and breaking down our thinking process towards understanding our own research, seeing how we can approach the problem. And specifically with my research question, I chose to do an interview. And with these design and test worksheets, were specifically designed for that particular research tool. So for example, as we can see here's my research question. What is the psychology behind the mind of the artist that influenced someone's perspective on society issues? And here are several other questions that kind of like break down so we can understand what it is that we will be doing. And this is asking who will I be interviewing and why am I going to interview these people? What information about your research or purpose for interviewing your participants. So it's kind of putting those ideas together to better understand what it is that I am looking for specifically. And kind of to understand on my own the reason why I am doing this question and what are these people going to provide for me to answer and find a solution to my own problem. And here we kind of created some questions so that it will help me later on to formulate and provide a structure for my research question. Some of the other things that I have learned is you look for ways to find a solution to your problem, and you always explain your secondary and primary research, which goes on to this particular worksheet, which is critiquing on the secondary sources. So this is kind of like breaking down your secondary resources and seeing what they have in common. And so this information can be used in my research paper, kind of finding like the major claims and supporting evidence and finding any connections and similarities so it won't be repetitive in my research. And so that can lead to, this is something that we developed as we were continuing with doing research using secondary sources. This is a map of my secondary resources, seeing where can I find the connection and seeing those similarities and differences. And here you can kind of see the transition from one article to the next. So you can see that flow and smoothness with your secondary resources. And so this, as I continued doing these worksheets, here is where I collected my data and analysis. So throughout with using secondary resources, I also use primary research. And this is kind of like organizing my interview data as the questions that I developed. So it will help me answer my research question. I interviewed a couple of people and they gave me responses to my questions so that I can use with my research. And with that came other comparisons and similarities with their responses and kind of seeing where that connection is and that relationship to help with my research. And with these secondary resources, you got to find the issue, and you can't just automatically assume that everything is going to be factual and that everything is correct. So as I was looking for some secondary resources, with these, it looks as if it's professional. With the display that they have here, you see that it has who wrote it, the date, and everything, but it can also be a manipulation of that. It can look as if it's credible, but really it isn't. This, compared to another one of my secondary resources, is with one of these, and here it looks very professional and very well structured, unlike the other one. And I have several other examples of my secondary resources that I am providing here. And so one of the things that you also need to do during the research process is see that these sources need to be credible. And so speaking of this, now moves on to another concept that I have learned throughout the semester. So now I will be discussing integrating secondary resources and writing with authority. So some of the things that I have learned with this concept is we use the library databases that are provided for us to search for secondary resources. So here I will use as an example is the UTRGV library databases. So here they're providing some links that can help you search, and there's many here for any type of topic that you need. You have history, you have psychology, anatomy, but one in particular that I used and learned is the Academic Search Complete. So here, by putting any words and keywords, you can find secondary resources that are peer-reviewed and scholared, which is these that I have found in order to use in my research paper. So we have to look closely to the information that is presented because it may look as if it's credible, but could be misleading. And we have to make sure that they are scholarly or peer-reviewed, which can be done through these databases that are provided by the UTRGV University Library. And another way that was done to see if these secondary resources were credible was through the craft sheets. So here, some of the things that we looked for was for currency. What is the timeless of the information? So here is providing when it was published, information was it revised or updated throughout the years since it was published? And are the links that are there that are provided linked to the resource functional? Because it may seem that they are, but once you click on it, maybe it's not working, or it's lead to another website that is not connected to the original secondary resource. So we have to look at the currency, and also is through relevance, the importance of the information that you need. Is this really what you need? And you have to kind of skim through the resource to see, is this really necessary for the research that I am conducting? And who is it for the intended audience? Is it an appropriate level? Because sometimes a little bit can be complex too, and if you can't even understand it yourself, then how will you be able to explain it to others? And is there references, and are you comfortable using this source for your research? And some other is authority. Are they credible in the source of the information? Who was the author, the publisher? And can we be able to come to, because these are people that have had experience with this information that is being provided to us. Because if not, then it will be just based on opinions of someone else that has an opinion towards that topic. And, well, is there any contact information, email address of the publisher who displayed this work? In case, if we don't understand the information, then can we reach them so they can answer our own questions? And so these is the crap sheet that we used to see if these sources are credible for our research. And the purpose of secondary resources is not repeating what has already been said, but discovering something new to your question that wasn't mentioned. And as we see, if these resources are credible and that everything is correct, then it can be used in our research paper. And here I have provided and mentioned some of the secondary resources that I found very useful through these crap sheets. So it can be used in my research paper. For example, the relationship between art and psychology. So here you can see the implementation of these secondary resources throughout my research paper. 18 things highly creative people do differently. And you see that transition with the secondary resources. And then after that is being discussed is my primary research that I conducted myself through others, so it can be used throughout my research paper. And then once your research paper is already done and fully developed and completed, that's when you can request feedback. And that is another concept that I learned which is peer feedback process. And some of the things that I learned with this is that feedback before Bonnie's was always about just checking for grammar, not anything other specifically, but through grammar is not the only thing, and we shouldn't let that distract us from the overall quality of what the person who is writing the paper and trying to convey to their audience. More you want to focus on the message and the purpose of why this person is writing what they are currently writing. And another thing that I learned is it's better to be specific about what you want and what you are asking for so it can be more clear. For example, here I have requested for some feedback throughout here in the comments because I had a little difficulty with my transitions from one secondary source to another in this article, mainly the connection between psychology and arts. I had a little bit difficulty with the transitions, and I wanted to see if someone could help me make it a little bit more clear towards the audience so they won't be confused. With what I am trying to say based on my research question. And some other comments that I have made is difficulty with conclusion, kind of ending my research. That it did not contain enough information compared to the rest of my research paper, or not clear on the message that I want the audience to get from reading my essay. I had a lot to say, and the transition between my secondary resources and primary research, but I couldn't figure out a way to conclude my essay. So those are some of the comments that I have requested. This way, that the feedback that you receive is directed to the problem, clearly stating the issue so you can understand what to fix and find a solution with requesting for feedback. And because sometimes we need another person's thoughts to help us understand our own mistakes on something that we didn't notice ourselves or that we didn't notice before. Sometimes it can slip through our minds as we get distracted with other things within our own writing, that sometimes we don't notice the small mistakes, and that is the purpose of the peer feedback process. So another thing that I learned is that we need to be honest in our feedback that we give and not feel bad or afraid to give help. Because sometimes we think that, or personally for me, can be a little bit embarrassed, and sometimes we don't want to accept our mistakes, or we don't want others to think and criticize our own writing, and we don't want to be embarrassed that we don't know how to do this or how to do that, but we shouldn't be afraid to ask for someone else's opinion so that we can better our writing to help each other. That's what we are here for, to help one another with our writing and to improve and get better on these ideas that may not be fully developed. And so some of the examples of this is giving someone else feedback. So as I requested for my own feedback, I was required to give someone else feedback, so to see if we can understand what they are asking for. For example, I gave feedback to this person because, to my understanding, I see that you were having trouble with elaborating on the paragraph about feedback. Some suggestions that I would give to you is to add examples of a student who is receiving feedback and how they interpret the information. So, as I gave my own feedback to that person, I used what I have learned as I read through the research. I kind of found that specific area where I didn't understand or wasn't clear enough. So I gave him some advice on how to improve and give more detail as to what the proper feedback, like to a compare and contrast. And then at the end, I kind of gave him a little sense of courage, and overall, I enjoyed this paragraph and the use of your secondary sources. I hope my comment on this was helpful. Not only did I give him some advice on how to improve on his paper, but I gave him some encouragement and a little bit that, just to tell him that I enjoyed what I read as a reader. Some of the challenges that I actually faced while doing this is that I would think to myself that if I can't even fix my own mistakes in my research paper, how am I supposed to help someone else? Because I may think to myself that, why am I going to help someone else when I can't even help myself? That if I can't even understand my own research paper, then who am I to say how they should write their research paper, which here is clearly not the case, because I learned that helping someone else will make me realize my own mistakes, and I can go back to my own writing and see how I can apply that to my own research paper. So sometimes we need to realize by seeing in others that we make the same mistakes and we have something in common, that we are all different, but seeing those mistakes can help us improve in our own writing, because we may not realize it ourselves, the mistakes that we made, because we think that what we wrote is great, which can be, but sometimes we need to realize that in others that we can make the same mistakes. And so, like I said, feedback doesn't always have to be about grammar, the spelling. It doesn't have to be perfected, but more overall on the quality that you provide and the content of the background knowledge that you have researched and discovered, and that the overall content is helpful. So, throughout the semester, I have learned the research process and how that can be done by the breakdown of through worksheets, and my use of secondary resources, how that can be done through crap sheets, and my secondary resources to lead to my research paper, and integrating the secondary resource and writing with authority and peer feedback process, and how this can be done. How I will apply this in the future is by taking these skills that I have learned through these worksheets and throughout the entire semester, is by implementing it and realizing that not everything is what it is. And sometimes you can be manipulated by what is being seen, but you have to thoroughly check and evaluate if something is credible. And if I happen to do research in the future, which I probably will, I can use these skills of what I have learned with the breakdown and the separation and through analysis, so I can fully understand something. And in essays that I will do later on in the future won't be as complicated as I used to think it is, because with writing it's about what you think and what you know and what you have discovered, and discovering something new. And through these secondary resources, you have to find what you can't just use what is being said. You have to look for something new, because that has already been done before, but what can you take from there so you can use it in your own words? And you're developing some new ideas in something that you disagree or agree with what is being said, but also what it is that they're lacking to mention, and how can that be used through your own writing. And that was being done throughout the entire semester as we slowly were developing our research process, thinking and our question, and finding the solution to that problem. And how can that be integrated with our future writing? So I will take these skills that I have learned and apply it as I continue my education and conducting research and writing. And as I was before, compared to last semester to this semester, I have completely blossomed. And it has opened my eyes that what I have been taught before in high school, that you don't have to necessarily follow a particular structure. You can make your own don't be afraid to express your ideas and thoughts and what you think while also using it as a comparison to other secondary resources and primary research. So I hope you enjoyed my video. Thank you. Bye.